Good morning. Welcome to the OHSU Effect Inside Health and Science. I'm Lacey Evans. The second half of today's show is dedicated to taking part in medical research, how you can do that, how it will benefit you and others. But first, we're going to talk about hoarding, a problem that has been thrust into the mainstream thanks a little bit to reality TV shows. But it is a very serious problem. Hoarding is the excessive collection of items along with the inability to discard them. It can affect the way people live, and it can be deadly. Some people also collect animals, keeping dozens or hundreds of pets, often in unsanitary conditions. With us now on the OHSU Effect is Dr. James Hancey, the director of the Outpatient Psychiatry Clinic at OHSU. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, how common is hoarding, first of all?
We don't really have any good solid data on the actual incidence of hoarding. We know that about 2.4% of the population have obsessive compulsive disorder. And hoarding is one of the variations of this disorder. It's on that obsessive compulsive spectrum of disorders and behaviors.
Did I describe hoarding correctly?
That's right. Like most obsessive compulsive behaviors, they're a variation or an extension of normal. There's nothing inherently wrong with the activity itself. It's the degree to which it takes over one's life.
So what are the causes?
A lot of it has to do with the individuals wanting to be sure, what if I throw this away and what if I need it? There are other people who have a lot of sentimental attachment to some things and find it hard to discard that. With children, sometimes there are some kind of magical thinking. If I throw this away with a bad thought or get rid of this, then something bad will happen. It's this kind of magical thinking where two items are not connected, but people tend to think that they think of them as connected.
Sure. So talk more about this relationship between hoarding and OCD.
Well, the obsessive compulsive disorder is really a disorder characterized by recurrent intrusive thoughts or repetitive behaviors which go beyond the norm. And in this case, frequently with a hoarding, people will collect things, and there's nothing inherently wrong with collecting things. But again, it becomes the magnitude and the degree to which it takes over one's life. Typically, with the hoarding comes to the attention of treatment, or comes to the attention of treating physicians or treating therapists, when the person has becomes embroiled in this to the point where it's interfering with their life. And of course, the major and the most tragic outcome is when there is so much stuff in the home that the home becomes really unlivable and represents a fire hazard. And also, one of the issues is that the emergency personnel don't have ready access in case of a fire or in case of a medical emergency.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Just in recent weeks here in Portland, we've had 2 of those fires. And if my memory serves correctly, I think one of them was deadly. So, I mean, this can really affect people's lives.
Profoundly so.
Are there several degrees of hoarding, like minor to major cases? Is there a spectrum here?
There really is a spectrum. And again, we only treat it if it's interfering with functioning. In the obsessive compulsive disorder group that I run, there are a number of people who actually are in subsidized or public housing. And the annual inspection is always an issue for these people, that they have to get things cleaned up enough that they're going to pass their inspection because they're afraid of getting evicted.
You talked about the sentimental value, that people don't want to throw something away, or how kids have thoughts attached to these items. But really, how does it start? I mean, how does a person go from a collector to a hoarder?
Well, I think it is a matter of progression. And for many individuals who are very involved in hoarding, they will continue to deny that this is not a problem. I just collect things. But much of the issue, I think, starts around, I can't get rid of this because I have a plan for it. I will find something that I need this for. Some of it has to do with this notion of frugality. If I throw something away, it's wasteful. And so there are a number of different motives, I guess, if you will, that need to be addressed when you're trying to treat an individual with hoarding behaviors.
What are those motives?
Well, as I say, for some of it, it is this the thing that I might need this in the future. I'm unsure that it was okay to get rid of this. I want to save this for sentimental value. And each of these motives needs to be addressed depending on the individual and the particular aspects going on.
What about animals when people collect or have so many animals? Is that along the same lines as items?
It is along the same lines as items. And unfortunately, in those instances, frequently our suffering are the animals themselves because they're really not possible to take care of that many animals.
What kind of impact does this have on other family members?
Most often, the individual tends to become isolated. They're embarrassed usually by this or ashamed of it, and so they are very reluctant to have people over at their home. It becomes, I think, an issue for other family members because they frequently know what's going on, and they're pained by the difficulties that their loved one is having.
And what about children, though, if they live in a home with parents who are hoarders? How could this affect them?
Well, I guess in the extreme sense, they will be removed from the home. If the home is not sanitary, is not a healthy environment, the Children Protective Services will need to remove them.
And you mentioned that the person is often ashamed of this and won't have people over. So really, they could be secretly hoarding and no one would ever know.
That's right. Very often that's the case.
Let's talk about treatment options. What are they?
Well, the best results are really achieved with a combination of some medication to help kind of calm down the anxiety. But really what is needed is some hands-on in-the-home therapy. And so this requires a therapist really to go out to the home and go through the process with the individual. Do you really need this? How many of these? Why are you holding on to this? Sometimes a family member can act in that role, but it places a big burden frequently on the relationship because some resentment can develop as the therapist or the family member is trying to encourage the person to part with something. And there gets to be a lot of friction involved sometimes.
Sure. So it doesn't sound like it's as easy as we see on the reality TV shows.
No. What does not work is get a big party of people together and come in and clean it out in one day because people will, first of all, they will fill it up again within about 6 months. Secondly, it is a very painful process for the individual. And so there's a lot of resentment that gets developed there. So that usually does not work. This is a long process and it really requires someone going in there working on a continuing basis with the person.
So you mentioned medications. How does that fit in here?
Because the anxiety is a huge feature here. And the obsessive-compulsive disorder in its broadest terms really responds better to the serotonin-based agents are the best that we have right now. And so the best results are really achieved with a combination of the medications to control the anxiety and calm that down, and also some then the intensive kind of cognitive behavioral therapy that's needed.
Do hoarders relapse?
They do. Not all the time, but they do.
And what about the signs that a person should seek treatment? I mean, what's that line of going from a messy person to a hoarder that needs treatment?
I think it usually is crossed when other individuals bring it to the attention that this is not safe. Frequently, there will be a lot of disrepair in the home because the person is too ashamed to call in a repairman to fix the sink, for example, or fix the stove. And so there are a lot of times non-functioning aspects of the home. The refrigerator might not work, the plumbing might not work in the bathroom. And so it's usually something like that it should be the clue, the tip over that this is not sanitary.
Sure. Well, I have more questions. Do you mind sticking around with us for another segment?
That would be fine.
That's great. That's Dr. James Hancey, the director of the Outpatient Psychiatry Clinic at OHSU. We're talking about hoarding today, and he's going to continue the conversation in 5 minutes here on the OHSU Effect Inside Health and Science.